Spotlight. This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on Prime Minister's Mauritius visit, a new chapter in India-Mauritius relations. The participants are Atul Aneja, Strategic Analyst, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, Anchor.
I'm joined by Shri Atul Aneja, who's a strategic analyst, and today we would be discussing on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's two-day visit to the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls this ties with Mauritius a new chapter in the India-Mauritius relations.
भारत और मॉरिशस का संबंध केवल हिंद महासागर से ही नहीं बल्कि हमारी साझी सांस्कृतिक परंपराओं और मूल्यों से भी जुड़ा है। हम आर्थिक और सामाजिक प्रगति की राह पर एक दूसरे के साथी हैं। रक्षा हो या शिक्षा, स्वास्थ्य हो या स्पेस, हम हर क्षेत्र में कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर चल रहे हैं।
This is the second visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the island nation. The first visit was in 2015 and he has been invited as a chief guest at the Mauritius National Day celebrations on March 12. A new chapter in the India-Mauritius relations. Sir, it's good to have you on the discussion, Mr. Aneja.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine, Arjun.
So, we would be talking about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's second visit to the island of Mauritius, how important it is for Mauritius to be a partner and alliance with India. Why are we giving foreign aid to this country? What are the strategic reasons for this relationship? Mr. Aneja, could you tell us, for the benefit of our listeners who are trying to understand, who recognize Mauritius as a tourist destination, why is it that it is of such strategic interest to the government of India?
There are several reasons for that, Arjun. The first is that we have a very strong historical relationship with Mauritius. This was a country where there's a strong diaspora population because of the British colonial rule. So there's a migrant population of Indian origin in very, very large numbers. If I recall correctly, it's the majority in Mauritius. So there's a very strong people-to-people connect. That's number one. Number two, if you talk about the strategic element, I think it's important to recognize that Mauritius abuts a number of very important sea lanes of communication. So it's a major geography, and if you, from where these global shipping lanes, trade ships pass. So it's very, very important from a strategic perspective that these sea lanes of communication remain uninterrupted. And therefore, it's important that a country like India, which is trade dependent, especially on terms of its energy security, that there is a friendly neighbor, friendly country, which would, in case things go south, would be of assistance to India. So that is number two. Number three, Arjun, if you recall, Mauritius is the territory or islands of the Chagos are part of Mauritius's maritime territory. And this archipelago is extremely important because their base of Digogasha, which was essentially British but leased out to the Americans, is part of the Chagos archipelago. Recently, the Mauritius government, and thanks to India's intervention, has got full control over the Chagos archipelago. And if I recall, the Prime Minister of Mauritius, in his statements during Prime Minister Modi's visit, did mention that Antony Blinken called him to say how Indian diplomacy was in intervention went a long way in getting that deal through between Mauritius and the Americans going. So you see, there are a number of strategic reasons why this geography is extremely important. And to have this special relationship, a strategic relationship, is exceptionally important from an Indian perspective. And from a Mauritius perspective, to have a large neighbor like India to be its special friend is of importance to them as well. If there is tomorrow humanitarian disaster in that zone, then I'm sure India would be the first responder to that. We have the capability to help them out in case such a eventuality arises. In any kind of crisis, if you recall even COVID, the Prime Minister himself acknowledged that, had Prime Minister Modi not personally intervened to get him medical treatment in India, it was a life-saving effort by the Indian Prime Minister. It's not just bigger disaster when it comes to health, it comes to education. I think there are several layers which ultimately feed into this very strong people-to-people connect between us and Mauritius. So there are several reasons why this is very special. And my last point is that location of Mauritius is also not far from Africa. So in a way, from a strategic perspective, Mauritius is India's gateway to the east coast of Africa, which is the Indian Ocean coast. So there are more than one reason why this is a special relationship and why this is such an important strategic relationship, Arjun.
So clearly, Diego Garcia, the island over which the UK-US have a military airbase, and it has a military importance as well. This is a deal that Mauritius signed with both the countries for strategic reasons as far as UK and US is concerned. And just looking at this layer of the alliance with India, India supporting Mauritius' claim over Diego Garcia Island, and it's not be used as a military airbase. Is that the clarification that we are seeking right now in this program?
Yes, that's important. That's an important nuance we have to keep in mind in terms of usage of Diego Garcia. But as far as the Chagos archipelago goes, that belongs to Mauritius. There are nuances within, but the fact is that these islands chain did not belong to Mauritius. And if you look at from a geo-economic perspective as well, this ocean floor has polymetallic nodules, it has good fishing resources. So it does add to food security, to generally the mineral security of Mauritius. So it's important that the Chagos archipelago belongs to Mauritius.
So clearly India is supporting Mauritius' claim on Diego Garcia, and any airbase that has been agreed to for setting up this military defense for the UK-US is something that India strongly supports the Mauritius government, including its Prime Minister's claim on this particular island in the archipelago. So that's one issue that we have covered as far as the relationship between India and Mauritius is concerned. There is the other, where we are giving extensive foreign aid, which is literally shaping Mauritius government as a democracy. Could you tell us why that's the case? Because the grants are substantial. We're talking about grants where in 2016, $353 million US dollars. In 2017, $500 million US dollars, where we are setting up Mauritius Police Academy, the Forensic Science Laboratory. Let's not just talk about the infrastructure. We can go into that later. But in terms of its governance model, we are doing a great deal in terms of shaping the democracy. Why are we taking so much effort with Mauritius?
Well, for several reasons, because one is the traditional relationship which we have with Mauritius, which I talked about. Second thing is because it's of great strategic importance, and we wouldn't like Mauritius to be influenced by countries which have a problematic relationship with India. So I think it's important that we recognize our friends and we keep them as our friends. Third thing I think is our approach is very different. It's not a question of giving just aid, but as you yourself mentioned, more important is capacity building inside Mauritius, so that people of Mauritius are self-reliant as far as possible. So, it's a different kind of a model of engagement where your dependence on the host country, in this case India, is not to the extent that it's a permanent dependency, that there is an element we are introducing in terms of capacity building which makes Mauritius self-reliant, and that breeds a kind of a sentiment towards India of a non-hegemonistic nature, which is very, very important in terms of India's overall image, not just for Mauritius, Arjun, but the image which is carried across the global south. After all, you recall at the G20 summit, the whole slogan from our side was that we are a bridge between the north and the south, and between the global south and the developed world. But for that, a positive and a constructive image of India is extremely important if we're going to play that role. So this particular rules of engagement, if I may call in, with Mauritius is not just for Mauritius alone, but it conveys a much larger message to the global south. And I think that's a very important message for the future.
So this economic aid that we are giving is entirely on the development side. We're looking at 20 plus projects which are India funded. On the other side, we're looking at how it supports the people of Mauritius. Clearly, they are of Indian ethnicity, so they would benefit from that as well. You have the area health centers, you have community projects 20 in number. Sports infrastructure is being given focus to 956 housing projects, medical clinics, National Archives and Library building, renal transplant center, ENT hospital. Then you also have the Metro Express project, and this is just on the infrastructure side, which benefits the public just economically. Then, of course, on the governance model side, I had mentioned earlier, it also includes the Supreme Court building. It seems to be an effort which is also targeting the people of Mauritius. Why is that the case?
Absolutely, because you see, leaderships come and go, but you have to develop a very strong relationship, a very long-term relationship with the people. That adds continuity to our relationship with Mauritius. But this is a model, Arjun, we have sort of mastered, I would say, because this was exactly the way we went ahead when it came to Afghanistan, for example. I mean, it was high-impact projects, capacity building, etc. We are going in and expanding the scale of that, though, because we have the capacity to do much more for people-to-people projects than before. And that is finding expression either it is Mauritius or when Sri Lanka was in complete doldrums economically. I mean, then billions of dollars were poured in by India to stabilize that country and stop it from getting into the direction of a failed state. So this approach is something which will be India's stamp in terms of imagination of the global south. I think we're doing pretty well.
So first issue, we're supporting Mauritius in terms of their sovereign claim on the Chagos Islands, specifically Diego Garcia. Then we're talking about foreign aid, which is a direct benefit transfer to the people of Mauritius who bear ethnicity of being Indian. Then, of course, we have the corporate governance model. We are supporting infrastructure projects, but which are specifically for government usage itself, which benefits the country in terms of it being a democracy. My fourth question is the hearts and minds issue. It appears that Prime Minister Modi has won the hearts and mind of Prime Minister Naveen Ramgoolam as well. There seems to be a personal relationship which is benefiting Mauritius greatly, and we've seen that with Prime Minister Modi and his relationship with President Putin as well, which goes a long way in terms of the foreign aid and a more personal touch to the relationship.
Absolutely. Your personal chemistry, Arjun, is extremely important in any kind of bilateral relationship. And the Prime Minister has this natural outreach at an emotional level to world leaders and to people of countries wherever he travels to. And whether it is President Putin, there's a personal chemistry over here, or at one time when the Prime Minister visited the US and then, you had this personal kind of rapport with President Trump. And the same goes with Prime Minister Naveen Ramgoolam. And I think it's very important. This was mentioned by the Prime Minister. The second thing, which I think was very, very touching, was, he carried the waters of Prayag to Mauritius, for people who couldn't come for the Kumbh Mela here. I think that really touched a people-to-people chord at a very mass level. This is something which makes him very special and which adds that X factor to the relationship between India and a third country. And I think we saw that exemplified and amplified in full measure during Prime Minister's visit to Mauritius.
Thank you, Mr. Atul Aneja, a strategic analyst, for discussing at length and in depth Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Mauritius, his support to Mauritius in terms of the sovereign claim to the Chagos Island in the archipelago, the infrastructure development in Mauritius in terms of the foreign aid that India is providing, both in terms of ease of governance in Mauritius and direct benefit transfer to the people of Mauritius who share Indian ethnicity, and more importantly, the personal relationship that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has with Prime Minister Naveen Ramgoolam of Mauritius. Thank you, sir.
You were listening to a discussion on Prime Minister's Mauritius visit, a new chapter in India-Mauritius relations. The participants were Atul Aneja, strategic analyst, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 92890 9044.
Spotlight.